Okay guys, this is the introduction video to solving absolute value inequalities. In this video, I'm just going to give you the basic rules, and then in the following video, I'll actually give you some examples. So when we are solving absolute value inequalities, you're going to treat them like you treat your absolute value equations. Okay, you will always have two solutions, and they are joined by the union. Remember, they're OR. You want to keep the variables on the left-hand side, isolate your absolute values, split into your two equations, and this is going to change a little bit, okay? And then check for your extraneous solutions. This is also different from when you were solving the equations. The extraneous solutions aren't just going to be when you have a negative on the left. So, for example, when you were solving absolute value inequalities, if you had a negative number over here, you were going to have no solution, because you know that the absolute value of any number is positive, and a positive cannot be equal to a negative, so you have no solutions there. With inequalities, it's a little bit different because we're talking about an entire set of numbers that are your solutions. So if you have something like the absolute value of x is greater than a negative number, you have to think about that. The absolute value of x is always going to be a positive. So is a positive greater than a negative number? Yeah, that's a true statement, so you will have solutions there. If you have something like the absolute value of x is less than a negative number, then that's a little bit different, because that's where you have positive is less than negative, and that's not true. So in cases like that, you're going to have no solution. So make sure that you check that. As always, remember that when you are multiplying or dividing by a negative, you have to flip your inequality sign. So when you're taking the absolute value of an inequality, you're going to treat it in the same way that you treat your equations for absolute value. So when we solve for the absolute value of x is equal to 4, you have both the positive side and the negative side. Okay, in the positive side, you just take what's given, you know what you have. So you have x is equal to 4. With the negative side, you have the negative absolute value of x is equal to 4, okay, and then you had to divide by that negative 1 on both sides, so that you would get the absolute value of x is now equal to negative 4, which you could write your equation x is equal to negative 4, and then you had the union of the two solutions. Remember, it's one or the other. The same thing is going to apply here when we're talking about inequalities, except when we deal with inequalities, we have that rule that when you divide by a negative number, when you multiply or divide by a negative number, your inequality sign changes. And that's what's going to happen here. So remember, first off, you have to isolate your inequality, which we have here. Nothing on the left, nothing on the right. And we can break it up into our two inequalities over here. The positive side is just what you have. So you have the absolute value of x is greater than 4, okay? Which you would just get rid of the absolute values to go ahead and evaluate it and end up with x is greater than 4. So that one's easier. When you're dealing with the negative side, you have to apply that negative value. So I'm going to write them over here in a different color. So you have the negative absolute value of x is greater than 4. We have to isolate the absolute value by getting rid of this negative right here. So in order to do so, you have to divide both sides by negative 1. Now your negatives cancel here on the left, and you're left with the absolute value of x over here. However, when you divide by a negative number, you have to remember that your inequality is going to change. That changes to the other side. And then you're left with 4 divided by negative 1 is equal to negative 4. Okay, so two things happen when you go to evaluate the negative side of your absolute value inequality. The first thing that's going to happen is that you are going to flip the inequality, which happens because we are dividing by a negative. And then we are going to change the sign of the value on the right, because we have divided by the negative. So if it's a positive, it's going to become negative. If it's negative, it's going to become positive. So that you now have the absolute value over here of x is now less than negative 4, which gives you x is less than -4. So now we have our two solutions. Okay, 1, 2. There's two ways, well, there's a few ways that you can write it. Here you have x is greater than 4 and x is less than -4. These inequalities can be written in an inequality form. Okay, x is greater than 4 but less than infinity. Okay, this one is x is less than -4. Okay, if it keeps on going in that other direction, it's going to be greater than negative infinity. If you wanted to write it in interval notation, those are with your brackets. Remember, you have open or closed, so you have 4, infinity, and these are all connected by the union, right? Negative infinity to -4. Sorry, those are parentheses over here. Okay, and that's also going to give you your graph over here. So if you have x is less than -4, that's an open circle to the left, and x is greater than 4, that's an open circle to the right. I always recommend that you draw your graphs up at the top, up above, so you can kind of look and see what's happening. That way, if they overlap or if they're pointing in the same direction, you can combine the two graphs. And you'll see some examples like that in the following video, or if you don't remember or are unsure of how to graph compound inequalities or inequalities that have more than one solution, you might want to come see me or look that up on one of the other videos. So your solution, which is what is in blue, is what you would give me. Okay, you have arrows pointing in the opposite direction. All right, so that's it. Write these rules down. Remember why they happen. If you have any questions, feel free to come and see me. And make sure you watch the next video for some more examples.